If we understand the endocannabinoid system, each of us will choose to take some form of cannabinoid enhanced product, whether that's a tincture, a gummy, whether that's soft gels, just to regulate our system so that we don't get sick and so that we don't overstress and so that we can downregulate. And that's the beauty of what CBD offers people in a very natural form.
Welcome to the Sock Drawer Podcast, where life is messy, but we always find meaning in it. Every week, we pull out the stories, the lessons, and the hidden gems. And then we ask the big question, keep it or kick it? If you're ready for real talk, brave steps forward. I'm your host, Lisa Begley, and you're listening to the Sock Drawer Podcast. Let's jump right in. Hey there, listeners. Welcome to the Sock Drawer Podcast. I'm your host, Lisa Begley, author of the Sock Drawer Philosophy and creator of the Drawer Method. Today's episode, just to let you know, is also brought to you by Project Icon, helping leaders and founders share their story, build their brand, and find their voice. On our show, this is where we talk about people, the real life experiences, right? Not the sugarcoat, the real life experiences that shape a life, the difficult seasons we go through, the unexpected changes, and the moments that force us to step back and ask deeper questions about who we are, where we're going, where we're headed, and why we want to get there. These conversations are about what people learn in those moments and how those lessons change the way they move forward, helping us all to continue to move forward. Today, I'm joined by Scott Schwab. Scott, he is the CEO of Mett Naturals, a company focused on transparency, wellness, and supporting farmers through a seed-to-shelf approach in the hemp and natural health industry. Scott has spent years building companies, navigating the realities of entrepreneurship, and leading through an industry that has seen rapid growth and major change. Scott, gosh, welcome to the Sock Drawer family. I am so excited to have you here. Thank you.
Lisa, thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Well, it is definitely my pleasure. All right, let's start here, just right out of the gate. When you look back at your journey so far, what is one moment or a season in your life that you would say really shaped the way you lead and make decisions today?
Yeah. And the thing that is most prevalent in my mind is a previous company that I was working in, founded. I found myself on the outside looking in. I had a business partner who we thought very differently. He was very technical. I'm very about people. And I found myself going on vacation for my birthday and then coming back and being replaced as the president of the company. So it was quite challenging. But what I learned there is people matter and communication matters, and what we say and our intent and how we approach, dealing with challenging circumstances, even disagreements. It's important to take care of people. And so that was probably one of those times in 2019 where I had to totally shift the way that I approached my work and how I showed up.
Wow. Well, first of all, I'm sorry that happened. But again, none of the, we don't move forward. We talked about this. We don't move forward without going through something. Right? We don't learn and continue to grow. So, well, thank you for sharing that with us, and we'll dig into that a little bit more. But before we jump into Mett Naturals, which I'm excited to hear more about, I'd love to learn a little bit more about your path, right? As you said, that was one thing that happened that led you where you are, but what were some of the other early experiences that pushed you towards entrepreneurship? Like, why entrepreneurship?
Yeah, thank you so much. And I had two parents that were very encouraging. My dad was a physical therapist, and in that physical therapy kind of clinic model, he started his own businesses. So entrepreneurship was always around me. But my life changed when I was 15 years old. I came down with a disease called Guillain-Barré. And what it is it's an ascending paralysis, and it destroys your myelin sheath. And the myelin sheath is the protective coating around your nerves. So when your myelin sheath dies, so do your nerves die. And so what happens is paralysis. And so at the age of 15, when I was expecting to play football and do the things that I had always been doing, I found myself in a hospital in a wheelchair, leg braces, and losing all of my function of my peripheral nerves, meaning my hands and my feet. And so it was a very different world within a week. I went from playing football to within a week being in the hospital, and it totally changed my mindset on who I was and my health and my wellness. And so to fast forward, I'm 6, 7 years ago looking at a scenario where I have neuropathy. And I'm like, what is going on with my hands and my feet? They're numb, they tingle, they hurt. Yeah. And started to learn that myelin sheath, when it's damaged, you're going to have some of those, symptoms show up when you're trying to sleep. It's like restless leg syndrome when you try to step out of bed and onto your feet. It feels like your feet aren't there. And are they actually going to catch me? And then you get these hot pockets or these hot spots on your legs that just like burn. And so I was looking for a solution, which really led me down the path to what CBD offers. Something at the receptor level that calms that pain and the signaling the receptors are, we're in pain and something's going on. And it was the first time that I felt real pain relief, and I couldn't even believe it. I was like, I've got to share this with the world.
So that was the moment when you said, okay, I've got to dig into this. So was it immediately, I'm going to start my own business and do this? Or was it like, I just need to look into it? Like, take me through that transition.
Yeah, great question. So initially I thought that hemp was marijuana. I just thought that they were the same plant. And so I was like, well, I don't know how I feel about that from like a scalability perspective. Yeah. Granted, the Farm Bill had just passed a year previously, so I was open to the idea, but it really took me to do my own research to figure out that genetically these two plants have been different for over 2,000 years, that hemp is not the same family. I mean, from a family perspective, yes, but they're not as close as people think. And so that gave me a lot of comfort. But me and my two co-founders were all Idaho boys. We've worked on farms, and we were raised on farms or in farming communities. And so we really wanted to take this product that is delivered in the form of consumer shelves and on retail shelves, on direct to consumer. And we wanted to be able to farm it the right way. So our first 2 years were all about farming to see what we could learn about the plant. And I'll tell you, Lisa, it's one of the most incredible plants that I've ever been around, just in how it puts more oxygen in the air than any other plant. It puts more oxygen and nutrients back into the ground than any other plant. And it's just this incredible, plant that gives so much back. I'm like, okay, this is really important for me to understand, like a seed to shelf type of a presentation to the world, because there was CBD everywhere. You could get it at a gas station. You could get it in a mall, at a kiosk. And we just felt like if we're going to build this, let's build this right, where we're responsible, we're accountable to what's put into the ground, how we treat it, additives we give or add to the plant or the soil. And that's really where it started, Lisa, was trying to find something that was different than what the industry was giving.
What year was this? So back then, what did the industry look like back then? Like,
it was the wild, wild west. It was completely crazy. We started in 2019, but there was other outfits, brands that had started, clear back in 2014, 2016 in Kentucky. Like, there was some brands that really jumped on the wagon or created it. And ultimately, we started in 2019, but you would go from product to product, even within the same brand, and you got a totally different experience.
Yeah.
And some things were misstated, misquoted on the labels. Everybody was just putting CBD on everything just because it was like this craze that people were like, yes, I want it in my drinks. I want it in this. I want it in that. And ultimately, I think it got marketed as a wonder drug. And I still believe very much in its healing capabilities, but it doesn't solve everything. And so if people know that for what it's going to do and not that it's a solution for anything and everything, I think that's more realistic. And I think that would have been better for the industry because you saw this really immediate, like pent up demand. You had a lot of people enter the market. And then a couple of years later, we've seen all of those people leave the market. The farmers leave that produce and they're not farming it anymore. And so in some ways, I felt like we approached it the wrong way, but at the same time, like I do think that it's seeing a resurgence, especially with some of the schedule changes that we've seen in the plant. But we're excited to be a part of it because there are real solutions. And when we think about every mammal has an endocannabinoid system, so our body already makes cannabinoids, it would make sense that that system oftentimes is going to have some deficiencies. And so we need to be able to get cannabinoids into our system to be able to recharge our receptors, to recharge kind of the pain and the inflammation that we receive from, chronic pain, exercise-induced pain, or acute pain. Like CBD is so great for pain, for stress and anxiety, and for these solutions like sleep and skin health and gut health.
One thing before we keep going, I want our listeners to understand, and this is something I had no idea. Is hemp different than CBD? Can you give us a little insight on that?
Yeah, great question. So the hemp plant has the capacity to grow in a way where it just is used for hemp seed oil or hemp hearts, right? That's going to come from the shell or from the seed or the de-shelled seed. That's what hemp and hemp hearts are. And you can just grow the hemp plant for those things. Now, there's varieties that you can utilize that actually grow and flower. And it's the flower and the leaves where you get the CBD. But here's the interesting thing, Lisa, is it's not just that one compound of CBD. Most people are familiar with CBD or THC. What they're not familiar with is the hemp plant has the ability to grow 120 different constituents. So that's CBD, CBG, CBC, CBT, all of these compounds, and the plant is incredible. And so I tell people, like, you can grow hemp just to be a hemp seed oil, and there's no compounds like CBD in it. Or you can grow something that's going to flower, it's going to mature more, and that's going to be your CBD plant. And then there's a totally different type of plant, type of genetic, which would be like your marijuana.
Okay. Thank you for telling us that, kind of giving us that clarification. So, Scott, you're the CEO of Mett Naturals, and the website is mettnaturals.com. Everybody can go and I watched the first video and just so informational, so explanatory. I loved it. And the company, so it focuses on sort of a business plan of like seed to shelf, right? Or business model of seed to shelf. And in the hemp and wellness industry. So for listeners who may not be as much familiar with that concept, can you explain what seed to shelf means and why it matters, why it's important?
Yeah, it's a great question. And we feel like it's the most important thing when we're looking at produce that is grown. Sometimes we'll see it in the form of what we eat. But if you have soil that is lacking nutrition, you're not going to receive the benefits like you think you are. Like it might be an apple, it might be a tomato, but if in the event that it was just sprayed with a ton of pesticides, you're going to have heavy metals in there, you're going to have residue. And we really look at our farming from a regenerative perspective. Like our first responsibility is to the earth and to the soil. And so we don't put on herbicides, fungicides, pesticides, insecticides, because what it does is it actually kills the ground. And so for us, we only use applicants like potassium, and sometimes you're going to use a calcium, and sometimes you're going to utilize different nutrients that the ground needs, because we're looking at the field microbiome to make sure that the microbiome in the field is going to support what plant we're growing. And so when we're thinking about seeds, obviously we're looking at the genetic of the seed, but we're also comparing it with what the soil is. So we do rotation farming or rotation crops so that we can continually look at the nutrition of the ground and always deliver the best products. So On the
Huh.
farm that we grow our products, we grow onions, we grow watermelon, we grow asparagus, we grow corn. And ultimately, if you're looking at the health of the ground, you're going to rotate those crops so that the nutrients stay dense in the ground. And so not every CBD company is going to have that level of detail or have that level of care over their products.
Uh-huh.
We think that that's a miss just because CBD is not CBD, meaning like if you pick it up here or pick it up there, there's going to be stark differences. And branding is part of it, but it's not just a brand because many brands just go to the open market and buy oil. And that's what they make their products from. For us, it's we plant those seeds, we grow those plants, we make sure that we harvest it. And we harvest it in a way where we're hanging every single plant and allowing it to cure rather than throwing
Mm.
it in a pile like some farms do. But
Yeah.
what people don't realize is that plant comes out of the ground with 14% moisture in the plant. If you
Yeah.
put it in a pile, you're going to have microbial damage and you're going to have mold. And
Mold.
mold doesn't
Yeah.
remediate. And then the other little
Mm.
secret that we tell people is how do you get the oil from the plant? Many companies use ethanol, butane, hexane. They'll even use a gas like CO2. I'm
Huh.
telling you, that is not good for that
Uh-uh.
plant. It kills the plant. And then we're expecting it to deliver this high potency formula that's going to help us be calm and help our pain and help our sleep. Well, if all we've done is beat up that plant, you will not have the benefits that you think you do. That's why we tell people, even if you've tried CBD before, the Mett Naturals experience is so different because we care for it from the moment that it's a seed to aligning it with what's in the ground. I mean, we test to the billionth particle. And we do that so that we can ensure that there's safety, that there's transparency with every one of our products.
Yeah.
And now we're pushing into kind of that world of the cellular testing, like the genetic testing you've probably seen on our websites. Ultimately, we're looking to align what your genetics need with what we can plant.
Yeah.
And some people call it biohacking. We simply just say there's an alignment of what our bodies need based on our endocannabinoid system and then what we grow in the form of a cannabinoid. Because you can get cannabinoids from eating carrots and from eating kale and black clover and echinacea. These are plants that already have cannabinoids in them. But for
Yeah.
our bodies to convert that food or the phytocannabinoid, we need to
Uh-huh.
have a good source. And that's why we're seed to shelf.
Love that. That is so good. And I would love to get a little more clear on, I know there's a lot of different products for different health reasons.
Yeah.
How do you separate that? Right. So
Yeah.
you create this product. Now, how do you go, okay, this is going to be for calmness. This is going to be for aches and pains. This is going to be for whatever else. How do
Yeah.
you make that distinction?
Lisa, I love your question because it really started for us with a literature review. We looked at over 5,000 different medical papers and we
Mm.
had an MD and a PhD lead us in what we should be applying our knowledge of CBD to, we'll call a category, right?
Okay.
So what we did is we looked at all of the different compounds or cannabinoids and we compared them to what they can do for energy, what they can do for stress, what they can do for pain and inflammation. And so our 5 categories are going to be sleep. That's our number one category. Sleep
Sure.
is actually something that most people are curious or interested about and not getting enough of. And so that's why we feel like that category is so restorative and you don't just want to be knocked out. Some people think that if they take THC that they're going to just get the best night of sleep, but they actually don't go through the cycles of sleep. And so what you need in that formulation is CBN. It's a compound that allows you to get restorative sleep, depth of sleep, and REM sleep. And so that's how intuitive our process is to be able to align the compounds or the cannabinoids with the category of sleep. We also have recovery or recovery from pain and inflammation. We have stress and anxiety, which is really just about getting our sympathetic system calmed down and our cortisol levels to come down. And then we've got gut health, which is so crucial for today's, environment where a lot of us have challenges in our gut. But if we
Yeah.
can solve our gut problem, we can solve some of our hormone issues. We can solve some of our dopamine issues. Like really everything passes through our stomach lining. And if in the event that we treat our gut like our second brain, I think that we'll be far more pleased with our results on a day-to-day of how we feel. And then, Lisa, our last category is skin, because again, when you're thinking about skin care, it's our greatest organ or our largest organ. And if in the event that we're going to care for it, it needs moisture, it needs care at the receptor level. And that's what CBD does, is it's going to treat the receptor level and help calm down dry skin, skin that's like irritated, whether it be through a rash or some type of eczema, rosacea. A lot of that is really beginning in the gut.
Mm. That's interesting, and I'm glad you said that. That's a good point. Now, as you were putting all this together, doing this research, talking with medical doctors, figuring all this out, what were some of the biggest challenges that you faced when you were building this business in the early stages?
You asked another phenomenal question, and anytime you have an industry where a lot of people are jumping into it, it becomes
Sure.
this like hotbed for a lot of bad players.
Uh-huh.
And honestly, the first thing that we had to learn was who to trust. And
Um,
we were disappointed by so many different experts and so many different people who were consulting in the industry. Ultimately, Lisa, we had to look around us and just realize that we had to trust each other. And that's as far as our extension was going to happen. And then over time, we work with partners who gain our trust. And then we have deliverables that are aligned. Everybody wins when we approach it that way. But when
yeah,
somebody just wants to be paid for their knowledge and they're not really willing to show up and they're not really willing to put in the work, we just found that those bad players really left a bad taste in a lot of people's minds, because
yeah,
they were there for the check to get paid, but then they were never there to show up to get, for farmers, product placed into an extractor and get them paid. So
yeah,
many farmers did not get paid. On the extraction side, there was so much material that there was this bottleneck that we couldn't get things pushed through into
huh,
the industry. And then we had so many products being dumped on the market that there was no real quality metrics. And so people were like, I don't know what's good, what's bad, what is a good brand, what's a bad brand. And I
yeah,
think the good players really have emerged to the top. Whereas, some of those early people that were in it to get money or in it to, be a part of this, new hot industry, they're not around anymore.
yeah. And I love that you say that, because I always say that on our show, is that, if your intention and your heart is in the right place, building a business to help others, that's who stays. That's who has longevity. That's who makes it to the top, as you say. And I know the hemp and wellness industry, boy, it has experienced so much volatility over the past several years. I mean, for many years, but definitely I feel like the last 10 years has been really a struggle, right?
Yeah.
So from your perspective, I know you have partners. So as a founder with partners and all of that, what have those types of changes look like from inside your business?
Yeah, you really have to have raw conversations,
Yeah.
because we all approach something thinking that it's going to be better, more successful, more
Mhm.
enjoyable. And I really feel like any partnership can survive when there's communication. When partnerships start to struggle, it's because we bring in our own desires for what we want, and we may not necessarily consider what everybody else needs, wants. And
Yeah.
so when that open dialogue occurs, we can have these non-emotional conversations where it's like, hey, it's probably best that you move on because this is not doing what we thought it would. And to your point, there's been so many times, Lisa, where we were like, are we going to make it? Like, are
Yeah.
we going to get to that next stage of growth? Because this challenge and that challenge, I mean, we've spent millions of dollars on things that never happened, never came to fruition. And
Yeah.
sometimes that was people, and sometimes that was just the general industry of like not getting an appropriate farm bill in place in like 2023. Like
Mhm.
we're still in many ways looked at by banks as cannabis, and they won't bank cannabis. And by advertising, we can't put our products on Amazon, and we can't really do an effective job at marketing on Meta and Google. And so there's all of these hoops and there's all of these challenges. And we've just been fortunate to have really great partners and really get great retailers. And we've
Mhm.
really been able to sync our efforts into theirs and align in coming on the same page of, hey, let's get this medicine to the people, and
Mhm.
people will decide with their dollars. And when it works, they're going to come back because they know that they haven't felt this with other products or other solutions that have been advertised to them.
Yeah. Your website does such a great job of building trust just in the message that it
Oh, thank
provides
you.
when you watch it. Yes, you're welcome. I really, I mean, it was like watching a movie. Like I want to watch more and I want to learn more. And it really pulls you in. And I feel like I've reached a place where it really felt to me like I reached a place where, this makes sense. And I appreciate how open and not only vulnerable, but just transparent and honest you are. You know, you've described a lot of it here, but there's so much more detail on your website. So thank you for that, because yes, this is a product that people don't have, and they struggle to find trust in, I feel like. You know,
Yeah.
so it's hard. And it's interesting you say to me, like you're sharing with us that, you know, like you can't advertise, you can't put it on Amazon, and you can't, that surprises me in how big this industry is and could be. Why is that? Why do these advertisers and marketing companies and retailers, why do they put up a guardrail for that? Why?
You know, for so long, it was just put into the same category. So the DEA had, one sort of knowledge that, these two plants are the same. I mean, I was a DARE kid. And so when we were doing our assemblies, they're saying, don't do weed, don't smoke these things. And for the
Yeah.
longest time, I think everybody from a societal perspective just lumped them into the same bucket. And
Yeah.
so the first farm bill in 2018 was really an attempt to remove hemp and CBD from that banned substances list, but it still stayed a Schedule 1. And as a Schedule 1 product, Amazon, Google, some of these mainstream companies, they don't have to take a risk on it. So why do
Hmm.
that? Banks and the FDIC, they don't have to take a risk at it. And so why? And so in January, President Trump did an executive order where it was removed from a Schedule 1 and put as a Schedule 3. That's exciting to us because
Uh,
one, it's going to get the research, focus, attention, and dollars that it needs. And two, they're even talking about putting it into Medicaid, Medicare. So now it's going to have a place in the coding of how we treat our patients. Because if you're looking from a comparative perspective, like all of the opioids and all of the medicines and synthetics that have been pushed down everybody's throat for all these years, what is that doing to the kidney, the liver, to the overall body, to the cognitive health of our people? It just
yeah.
doesn't support it. You can't find the data that shows that synthetics are great for the body. But
Hmm.
what our message is that these natural products are going to not only support your body, but be non-addictive. It's going to treat your body from a receptor level rather than trying to take over what the natural body's function is. And so
Hmm.
I tell people it's the greatest regulator that nobody knows about, because our system is meant to have a homeostasis adjustment. That's what our body tries to do every day, is just get back to homeostasis. Cortisol
Yeah.
levels rise in the morning to get us up out of bed and get us going. But sometimes we get trapped in that cortisol level high and we can't come down. And so
Uh-huh.
whether you're treating, some of those anxious feelings or some of those like just being off with
Hmm.
exercise, sunlight, with plenty of water, those are all great things. And I think there's a lot of modalities. But if we understand the endocannabinoid system, each of us will choose to take some form of cannabinoid enhanced product, whether that's a
Hmm.
tincture, a gummy, whether that's soft gels. just to regulate our system so that we don't get sick and so that we don't overstress and so that we can downregulate. And that's the beauty of what CBD offers people in a
Yeah.
very natural form.
So good. I'm thinking, as you're saying this, I'm thinking about I must take 15 supplements. You know what I mean? Do all those things that you're saying. And I am going to shift. I'm going to jump over and I'm going to place my order today and start to feel more now. I keep thinking I'm doing things naturally. Like I read the labels. I worked for a detox company several years ago where, the mission it was to detox the body, right? To remove all of those things that you're talking about and bring the body back to a homeostasis process. But, and they had regenerative farms and things like that, but it was just like a one-time thing. Wasn't something that you could always continue to do. But anyway, I have like a more personal for you. I think we always talk about a point in someone's life where you realized, and you shared early on kind of something that maybe took place that helped you pivot and shift and brought you here. But where you realize maybe something changed, right? Maybe a shift in your belief, or maybe a direction change. Maybe you saw something about yourself that, you know, you hadn't seen before, right?
Yeah.
Have you had those moments? Have you had a
Yeah.
moment, Scott? What would you
Yeah.
say has been maybe, we call it a drawer moment,
Yeah.
one of your personal drawer moments that have happened to you?
Yeah, so in that 2019 timeframe, I was running my software company and we were rapidly becoming a school. We had just bought a university. And so, for all intents and purposes, what I was doing in the software world, what I was doing in kind of my ed tech world was
Okay.
everything I wanted. I go on vacation, my partner replaces me, and all of a sudden, I'm no longer in the board meetings. I'm no longer in these strategy discussions. And it was funny because I went and had some blood work done because I had such a pain in my side. And my
Yeah.
doctor said, "You have the kidney of a 65-year-old man. What is going on in your life,
Really?
Scott?" And I'm
Yeah.
like, you know what? I had put my identity on all the things that I was doing in my work, all of
Mm,
the winning that was taking place in these things. But I was so miserable because I had toxic relationships around me. And I came up with this theory at that point, and maybe it's my sock drawer moment, but I just thought to myself, you get to the point where either your company outgrows you or you outgrow your company. And
mm-hmm.
that's the moment that I knew I had to leave. And so what I did was I approached my friends and, we had farming access because of growing up. My business partner, Mark, he married the farmer's daughter. So we farmed from that farm and it's a beautiful family relationship.
Mm,
Yet at the same time, we understood going in that there was going to be a lot of work. And funny enough, as I left and as I transitioned out of that software kind of ed tech company,
yeah.
all of a sudden I started getting my health back. I started
Mm,
sleeping again. I started to find real life, but it
yeah.
required one of the biggest pivots, which was to leave my baby that I had started and to walk away from the ed tech world, which I dearly, dearly love education and the
Mm-hmm.
learning and knowledge process.
Scott, I'm still scratching my head on how they could do that to you. That's probably
Could
a whole nother podcast. But
be.
honestly, I'm like, I just can't. I can't imagine. But to your point about partners that you can communicate with and feel, honest with, and be honest and feel vulnerable and just be able to say what's really happening. I mean, that's a true partnership when you can do that. And it sounds like that's what you guys have now. And that's, shows
Well,
in
and I'll
the
tell you,
company.
Elisa, it's an interesting scenario because I've had enough time now to reflect and look back, and I
Yeah.
can't tell you that I'm innocent in everything. I looked back and I found
Yeah.
that I wasn't supporting him as the CEO. In fact, I was trying to get him replaced, and me speaking negatively about him and about our situations actually ended up hurting us in the long run
Yeah.
because people saw that we were a dysfunctional company. On the
Yeah.
shell, everything looked great, but there was some serious dysfunction. And
Yeah.
so my thought was leaving is going to, help all of that, when really, it made matters worse. I, of course, was able to kind of move my direction to Mett, and I was so happy for that. But, there's certain things that you're like, I wish I just would have closed my mouth and just worked and supported and done what I could have done to help the mission, to help the company move forward.
Yeah. I guarantee you'd be in the same place you are today, either way. And I appreciate that. I appreciate the honesty. I've, kind of been in similar shoes, and we talked a little bit about that before we jumped on. And so I totally understand it, but I take so much responsibility, for my own lack of knowledge, lack of understanding, lack of learning enough to be able to continue or whatever it was. So, I always appreciate someone who owns their own part in it, because, it always takes more than one person. There's usually, I should just say there's always two sides, or should we say three sides, right? There's this side, that side, and then the actual truth, what really happens, So let me just jump into, if we could, I want to first, before we jump into our Drawer Dash section, I want to first ask, is aside from, your website, where else can people find you? Or is that the best place for them to go? And we'll make sure that's in the show notes. But is there any other avenue? You talked about a sister company maybe coming up.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. I think the best place to get educated is really our social media. And we're a direct consumer brand first. And so a lot of people are asking questions, and we're active on our social media. And that's where the onus of what we do from an outreach comes, is influencers, affiliates. And so that's where a ton of education is. We've got things on YouTube, LinkedIn. Instagram is probably our largest following, but it comes because I think people are looking for something to help with a solution, and we feel like that's the best place to meet our audience.
Okay. All right. So you heard it, and we'll make sure all of that's in the show notes for sure, so you guys can get to them easily. Now, did we talk about your sister company?
No, and I'm glad that you brought that up. Mett
Wellness, do you want to, or should we wait and hold that for another podcast?
I do. And I think what we've seen in health and wellness, Lisa, is that there's products that address specific gaps. I think we're all bio-individual. And so there's going to be certain things that are going to be better for Lisa than they're going to be better for Scott. And so if we can extend our approach to wellness and extend the best practices, that's why we came up with a magnesium glycinate. We knew that it was going to be great for sleep, for cramped muscles, for overutilized muscles. And so we just focused on one magnesium instead of the complex, because your body doesn't always process it the same way.
Yeah.
The same way we did with our protein powders. We decided that whey alone wasn't going to be enough. It sometimes makes you gassy. It sometimes hurts your stomach. There's a lot of things that whey alone doesn't do. And so what we did is we put hemp heart protein in with the whey and combined them together. So we have a dark chocolate and a strawberries and cream. And not only is it delicious, but it has a perfect amino. If you're looking at amino acids, they're your building blocks of protein. So the more aminos, the better the protein. And then you also get fiber for your gut, which is essential, and then your omega-3, 6, and 9. So when we look at the product creation or the product experience, we want people to be able to say, yeah, this is going to help me with my sleep, my stress and anxiety, my pain and inflammation, my skin, or my gut health. And those are the 5 areas that we really focus on. And so Mett Wellness is an extension of what Mett Naturals is, both with the dedication to finding the gaps in some of our health and wellness and the needs of our body as it changes throughout the year.
Love that. Okay. So is that, if they go to metnaturals.com, are they going to find all of those products there as well? Or do they need to go somewhere else?
They need to go to metwellness.com.
All right. Look at that. Okay. So, we will make sure all that's in there. And that sounds exciting. When I think magnesium, I didn't realize I'm not going to share the story, but I didn't realize the things that it does for you or to you, depending on which whatever, like
Yep.
you said, there's like 5 or 6, right? Different kinds of magnesium,
Yeah.
and some are good for this. Something's good for this. Something's good for, you know, digestion. Something's
Yep.
good for sleep, right? How
Yep.
do you know which one to get when for what?
Yeah, great question. And we do a lot of posting on that, like
Okay, good.
citrate, right? Magnesium citrate is great for getting the bowels moving. But when
Okay.
that's not what you want, that is not what you should be taking.
Yeah,
Like
it's not
you may
helpful.
not be a person that needs, gut help.
Right.
Also, what we've found is that citrate and malate don't always play nice together. But you
Okay.
could go into like a Google search and just say, hey, tell me about the different types of magnesiums and what works well together. In
Okay.
general, glycinate is going to be the best thing for sleep, for like sore muscles, cramped muscles.
Mm.
And by the way, most people are like 70% of our population is deficient in magnesium. And so
Oof.
everyone should be taking a magnesium. Threonate is great for the brain. Again, citrate, like I talked about, is going to be kind of gut function and getting, the bowels moving. And
Yeah.
each of the magnesiums have their own little story, but in general, most people are needing magnesium.
Scott, I feel like we just had like a medical, a podcast here. You've given us so much great information, and thank you so much for all of that. And now we're going to shift into something we call the 60-second drawer dash. So this is just quick questions, first instinct answers, nothing, take your time. It doesn't, we're not under pressure here, but, just quick. So
Yep.
ready?
Yep.
Okay. What is one leadership lesson you've learned the hard way?
Perspective.
What is one belief you had early in your career that has now changed?
That it was one way and that it was my way.
Mm. What is a habit that helps you stay focused and grounded?
Reading.
Mm. What do you like to read? Not to stop our
Yeah, I read
what's your
all
favorite
sorts of
things to read?
things. So right now, Donald Miller's Building a Story brand is kind of the
Mm.
thing that's resonating the most,
Yeah.
because he tells us that we're not the hero of our brand. We're the guide, and we need to help our customers understand they're the hero. And
Ugh,
if we can help the hero achieve what they need to, and we're just the guide, then it's a great storyline for great growth.
of that. What is something people misunderstand about entrepreneurship?
That it's easy and convenient, and that you're always going to have so much time to just stop whatever you're doing and go and do something, fun.
So true. And what is something you are currently learning about yourself right now?
Resilience.
Yeah. Tell me more.
I'm in the time of my life. I'm turning
Mm.
45 in a couple of weeks. And I
Wow.
mean,
Happy
honestly, thank you. I'm
Yeah.
looking at my life in where I want to be as I settle into my 50s and 60s. And
Mhm.
I'm not where I want to be yet. And
Yeah.
part of that is how I mentally am. I need to think differently. And so I'm challenging myself to read more, to get more information, because if all we rely on is what's inside of this brain, then those are sometimes the thoughts that have always been there. And whether
Yeah.
they're toxic or whether they're freeing or whether they're supportive or constructive, like we really have got to look and challenge ourselves in ways that we're not completely putting ourselves down, but that we hold ourselves accountable. And by
Yeah.
holding ourselves accountable, we're accountable to our thoughts, our words, our actions, our inactions. And so set goals, but don't let those goals become the source of your stress and frustration and angst. So set better goals, and maybe
Mhm.
not 10 at a time, but one at a time. And
Yeah.
so I'm just trying to get back to the basics of really supporting myself in where I want to grow. And then where I want to grow will take me where I want to go.
So good. And thank you for that. So that kind of rolls right into our tiny dare. We talked about this. This is something that every guest, I ask them to leave our listeners at the end of every episode, something, something they can do. It's small challenge or something you would encourage someone listening to try this week. Scott, what would you give our listeners? What's something that you think would be helpful for them to move forward?
My dare to you is to go out and put your feet in the soil, whether that's grass, sand, whether it's earth. It has to be something that is earth, not concrete. Don't go out and stand on your sidewalk or in your driveway. Get your feet into the grass and just sit there for 15 minutes and try to silence your mind and just focus on your breath, like hear your breath. And if you can do that, I think that you'll start connecting with thoughts, impressions, ideas that aren't run by our normal habits. Because Charles Duhigg, The Power of Habit, is one of my favorite books, but we are our habits. Whatever we create, whatever we do day in and day out, that is our habit. And that's what's going to take over when our body is going to be looking for, what do I do? Well, habits kick in, and that's what you do. So if you want to change, you've got to change your habits. And so in my mind, that's my dare, is get out, connect with the earth. I think that there's power there, but do it in such a way where you're silencing what's going on in here, because it can be exhausting, as all of us know.
For sure. Scott, thank you so much for joining me today, for sharing your story with us, your perspective, and your business. And I'm so excited for the listeners to get those links and be able to look at your website and check things out and maybe find some ways to gain health back. If listeners would like to learn more about Scott and the work he's doing, of course, you can visit mettnaturals.com. And thank you to Project Icon again for sponsoring today's episode and supporting leaders who want to share their voice and their story. And to everyone listening, thank you for being part of the Sock Drawer Podcast family. We'll see you next week on another episode. Bye-bye for now.
All right, Sock Drawer family, that's a wrap on today's Drawer Dump. Big thanks to our guests for sharing their story and their heart with us. Until next time. Don't forget, life's too short for mismatched socks. Retire the ones with holes, inspire the ones that still shine. See you soon.